You are looking at this video because you are interested in Rabbi Polonsky's book. Is it something that you want to buy and read or give as a present? And if you got this far, the answer is yes. You do want to, and I will try to tell you why. Rabbi Polonsky's book is an important book in a genre of books which is very modern. The commentaries have been written on the Hebrew Bible and on all sacred books in every religion. Very much has been written. But very little has been written in the 20th or 21st century. And our lives are so different from the lives of our parents and of our grandparents. Our grandparents lived through the First World War. My grandparents, your grandparents probably lived through the Second World War. But in any case, towards the end of the 19th century, there was very little difference between the life of people from generation to generation. But the tempo of change has increased, perhaps exponentially, and we tend to see things as dynamic versus the way our forefathers saw it as more or less changing within the same kind of world. And we look for the change and how we know we have to change, and how our forefathers, or how the people in the Bible, which is what this book is about, how the people in the Bible development is change, of course. And so that is one of the important elements of Rabbi Polonsky's book, which is very worthwhile and is not as emphasized as Rabbi Polonsky does in most other commentaries. This is very important, very valuable, and a very good lesson. Very good to think about how people change over time. That, of course, applies to our families, and of course it applies to us. And as it applies to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to Noah and to Abraham, so it applies to everybody. And can we change? Should we change? Can we control our change? To a certain extent, it's up to us. And we have to learn how to control our change. If you're interested, since you got this far and you are interested in the book, I'll tell you a little bit more about the book than is written in the introduction. The introduction is very important. It's perhaps more important than the book itself is the idea that what behind the book, as I was saying, about the dynamics and the change. The book talks in two languages. One language is a original interpretation of the Holy Book. In this volume is of Genesis, of the first part of Genesis. A second part deals with a different kind of commentary, a Kabbalistic commentary, which is Kabbalism is the Jewish mysticism. There are various schools of that. That's not the important point at present. I don't imagine anyone who is reading this book is so schooled in Jewish mysticism that he will have to know exactly what branch it is. It's not. It is very basic, and it's very interesting, and it is mysticism. So you have the two points of view. You have the understanding the story and the development, and you have the Kabbalistic point of view on this. You can take home either or both, and this is, of course, up to you. But certainly it's worthwhile being exposed to it and to see how the mystic interpretation helps understand the story, helps understand the people, and perhaps perhaps helps understand us. I just read you a little piece. Well, we talk about the flood, Noah and the flood. It's very disturbing. The idea that God changes his mind. Strange. Certainly doesn't fit in with normal theology. Well, normal theology has a big problem. Normal theology is basically built on Greek philosophy. And we say that God is omnipotent and knows everything in advance. All of this is Greek philosophy and is very far from the point of view of the Bible. The Hebrew Bible doesn't really, seems to say that God not only changes his mind once, he changes it time and again. And what causes him to change it is our behavior. In other words, the interaction between ourselves and between God is what drives the world and changes the world all the time. God is in the world. Some people don't believe in God at all. Okay. And some people are today deists like they were in the 17th century. They say, well, God created the world, obviously, but he has no influence on the world. I think that, well, a very famous fellow, Benjamin Franklin, said that as a young man he was a deist. And as he got older, he saw more and more that God is involved in the running of the world. And so when we take the holy books, I don't know about other, I don't read them, but in the Jewish Bible, we see God changing his mind, it says. God repents or changes his mind. Yes, well, there are statements against that. What does it mean? Rabbi Polonsky says, well, it's not Boolean logic. When we deal in reality and what really happens in the world, we cannot say it's either or. This is one of the good lessons from postmodernism. We know that what we know is not 100% necessarily correct. Anyone who learns physics, say, theoretical physics, I learned as a young man, I learned theoretical physics. But we knew at that time that quantum theory was a wonderful, exact theory, but we also knew, as Feynman said, nobody really understands it. We only know it and we know how to use it, but we don't really understand it. On the other hand, there was a theory which we thought really solved the basic problem, the general theory of relativity. Here, Einstein. Einstein is a relative, the woman who painted this was close to Einstein, and she was a cousin of my father. Now, Einstein's general theory of relativity was thought to really have solved the problem of the integration of time and space and electromagnetism and gravitation. But today we know that's not so. Today we know that there are many things in the cosmos which cannot be explained. And there are many people, highly intelligent people, who know that a new theory will have to be found. And so when they do find a new theory, those young men and women who learn the theory will think, well, now we finally know. But it is hardly likely that we will ever get to a theory which covers every aspect of the physical world, and we certainly know that we have very far from full knowledge of the biological world, and if we get to the psychological world, we know we're just swimming in a dark pool of water and don't really know where we're going. We try to advance as best we can, and we know that as we advance and we incorporate psychology and chemistry of the brain and structure of the brain, we're getting closer and closer, and we will always get closer and closer. Anyone who believes today that we will ever get to 100% accuracy, I think he's pretty foolish. Every scientist knows that in his field, it's not likely. We can only hope to advance, but we cannot hope to get there. And so he says, that's what he says. We try to say God knows, and we understand what that means. Some people still think that God knows what will happen in the future. However, sometime in the 50s, I think, we learned from Gilbert Ryle that a statement in the future has no truth or falsehood. You cannot give it a function of true or false. It's not logical. We know from Gödel that you cannot have complete theories. And so we know we will never be finished learning the Bible. And so I suggest you learn contemporary interpretations. Don't throw out the old ones because they have a lot to teach. Not everything. For instance, what we don't learn today. We had really one of the greatest thinkers probably in the world was Maimonides. And today no one except people who are interested in the archaeology of thinking would learn some of the things he wrote, because he believed the science that he knew was Aristotelian science. Today we think quite differently. We know that the sun does not revolve in cycles around the world. We know all sorts of things that he had no idea and could not have known. It's not a criticism of Maimonides, but it would be a criticism of someone today who tried to learn about the world from Maimonides. Today it's a little more complicated than the world of Maimonides, but it's different and closer to reality. And to get closer to the reality of the world and closer to the reality of ourselves, we have to learn contemporary thinkers. It's not long ago, about a decade ago, a cardinal of the Catholic Church said that the Church is 200 years behind the times. People who only learn books that are 200 years old are 200 years behind the times. So I really suggest keep up with the times. Also, in contemporary interpretations, comments, and in modesty, knowing that even whatever we think is certainly not what our grandchildren should be thinking, and probably not what our children will be thinking. Shalom uvracha.